Hey guys, this is Post-Production Pi, and welcome to another weekly Lightroom edit. Now, this image was shot in China, in Canton, near the harbor. I'm actually still in China, and I had some really cool kind of thoughts in mind for this image, and I'll tell you about that in a second. Basically, this image was shot in Canton, near the ocean. These are these large fishermen boats. They go out and capture these. They catch tons of fish, come back and sell them to local restaurants and everything like that. And these are basically their huts that are kind of right on the pier where they'll, clean their fish, or they even take naps, sleep, whatever. I don't think there's anyone living in them like permanently, but they're just kind of temporary places to, do work and stuff like that. All right, so when I shot this shot, I kind of had this vision for, that we have this really cool sunlight coming through the background, and then we have these blue shaded huts over the right side because they're in the shade, so the temperature of that light there is much cooler than the warm sunlight on the background. So I thought it'd be really cool if you had this kind of really warm background sunlight with kind of juxtaposed by these bluish kind of huts in the right side. So let's get to producing it based on that vision. Again, let's check out our camera settings. This was shot, I'm going to hit I. Whoops, let me click here. Hit I to bring up our camera settings. Again, I'm shooting at full RAW because on vacation when I'm shooting, I'm not sure if I can get close enough to what I want to shoot. So I shoot full RAW, so it gives me an option to crop down later. This was shot on a 7200 at 80 millimeters, so this isn't that far away. And then it's shot at f5 just to kind of make sure everything is relatively sharp at 1/2 of a second and ISO 100. So it's getting pretty, the sun's kind of getting close to setting, so it's not super bright out. All right, so let's first kind of just produce the shot, and then we're going to go in and add coloring. I think you guys would really like this. If it turns out the way I'm hoping, it'll be a really nice look and effect to the shot. So what I want to do is, by the way, I was very careful when shooting this shot to make sure that I wasn't blowing out any highlights in the background. So I actually shot this so it was a little bit underexposed. And I'll do this a lot of times. Rather than shooting something HDR, I'll shoot it so it's underexposed so that I don't have any blown details, and I still have enough shadow detail as well. And that way in post I can basically tone map it so we can pull out all these nice details. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with recovery. And I'm actually going to pull up my recovery all the way to 100. Why? Because I want to basically bring this background down while I also bring the fill light up, because I want to bring the foreground shadow up and out. And then what we're going to do is kind of balance it out with some blacks and maybe raise up the exposure just a little bit. I'm going to, my brightness a little bit. And then we're going to also add some contrast into this because, our recovery did kill some of that contrast. So I'm going to raise it up just a little bit more. And right about there looks pretty good. We can see if a little more fill light helps. What we don't want to do is go too high because it will start to look kind of faux HDR-esque, and it has a kind of a nasty look to it. So a look that I'm not a big fan of. So let's go down here to our tone curve now. Actually, let's adjust our clarity and everything before we go down there. I'm going to take clarity up to about +40. We'll bring our vibrance up a bit. And that's about good. We'll kind of touch on those again later on. And let's make sure our white balance is also good as well. Yeah, I think I'm good with it around 4800. Even a little bit, a titch on the cooler side is fine too. And that's fine right there. Okay, so let's go down to our tone curve, and let's switch this to linear. It's going to remove a little bit of the contrast, but that's okay. We're going to add it back. I just want to have a nice straight tone curve that we can adjust on our own without having any kind of previous lines or dots added to the point. Okay, so we're going to pull down the shadow just a little bit, and then we're going to pull up the midtones a little bit, and then we'll pull up the highlights just a tiny bit as well. So I want the background to be fairly bright, but not to the point where it's blown. You'll notice that the highlights aren't quite blown. And we can see that by hitting J. So if I hit J, you'll see that none of my highlights are blown. We still have detail in the shadows, and so I'm going to pull down the shadows just a bit more, just to kind of add a nice bit of contrast to this. Okay, that looks great where it's at. I'm going to hit J again to remove my highlight and shadow alert. And then let's actually pull it down a tiny bit. I think the background might be a little bit too high of a highlight now. Okay, might just pull down the exposure a tiny bit too. That looks great. Okay, so now what we're going to do is you can see kind of now the tones coming out. So we have these blue tones of these huts balanced out with the nice warm kind of sunlight in the background. So let's further tweak this, and what we're going to do is let's close up the tone curve. Let's go down into, actually let's do it this way. We're going to go into our adjustment brushes. You can get there by hitting K, make sure that they're all reset. So what we're going to do is create a new color brush. And all I want to do is just paint in a color. So all I'm going to do is add a color. And let's make it kind of a blue. So what we can do is we can click here and then drag over the image so that we're selecting colors over the image. So I want one of these dark blues that's kind of already over this shanty, so it kind of matches that look. So that looks good right there, and what we're going to do now is just paint over this area. And what we'll do is we'll adjust this in a second so that it's not too strong of an effect, because right now it's coming on a little bit too potent. Too much for my taste, but that's all right. It gets us a nice starting point. So we're going to paint over. I'm going to go back and retouch this with a smaller brush in just a second after I get kind of the basic stuff in. Okay, so now let's go in with our eraser. I'm holding Alt, and now we're just going to erase over the edges just to kind of clean up. It doesn't have to be perfect because it is going to be kind of a subtle color addition. So as long as it looks close, it'll be fine. We just don't want any of this blue basically over the water because that's going to look a little strange. So just kind of watching for that, cleaning up the edges. All right. Whoops, I went in too far. Okay, let's add back this area that I removed. All right, so you can bring your mouse over that point to see the overlay, or you can also hit O for overlay. We're missing a little bit in this bottom area, so let's add right there, and let's see where else we're missing. I'm just going to hit O so it stays up on the screen. So I'm just going to add right here too. Makes it a little bit easier, especially when you're doing a little cleanup work like this. Let's hit O again to remove it. And I'm good right about there. What I'm going to do now is just adjust the saturation a little bit just by pulling it down. So you can pull it down straight from here and you'll notice it just pulls out the saturation, or you can just adjust from here. Going up or down is just going to adjust more or less saturation. So let's see what looks about right. We know up here this looks too much. Let's pull it down, 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 down. Right about 25% looks about right. All right. So now let's do a little bit more. Let's kind of enhance some of the detail in the image and maybe some of the additional color as well. So what I might do is just boost up my temperature a tiny bit just so I get a little bit more warmth out of the background. So what I'm going to do now is basically select another brush by hitting K. I'm going to reset this. I don't want any color settings to this brush. This is just going to be a detail enhancing brush. So you guys can by the way, you guys can save out these brushes if you guys want, so just to keep that in mind. We're going to increase the clarity as well as the sharpness to about there. I'm going to go up a little bit higher in the clarity, and we're just going to paint in to enhance this detail over in this area, and we'll adjust it in a second too to kind of increase the amount if we need to. But I want these details just to kind of really have this kind of nice pop to them, and on the boat as well. So let's paint over this. I'm going to click on O to bring up my overlay just so I can see what's being painted. I want to be careful not to get too close to the water because the clarity will start to do, you'll start to get that fringing look on the water. So I'm just going to remove it from these edges right here. And again, same thing on the boat. It's okay if we go over the water, like where the reflection is, but we don't want to go over the white area. So I'm just going to adjust this, and we'll probably end up doing 2 layers of this. So the first layer is just going to be a general one that kind of enhances everything, and then we'll go over kind of more specific areas again in a second. So just going to add it in. Looks good there. I'm going to subtract out just to not cover any of the sky. And that looks about right. Okay, so let's click O. Okay, so now I'm going to take clarity up. This is very subtle right now, so I'm going to take it all the way up to 100 because it's not really affecting it that much. So let's also go up to sharpness and increase that as well. And we're going to add a new brush to do the exact same thing. Let's go up clarity up higher. We'll take sharpness. We'll leave sharpness where it's at. I just want the kind of the clarity to paint in some of this detail a little bit more. It all kind of just is done just to make this pop just a little bit more. It just kind of brings out that the punch in this detail, and you'll notice it when we switch back and forth. All right, that looks great. Now let's add another brush. We're going to start tweaking our exposure a little bit just to bring attention to where we want to. Actually, let's hold Alt, reset this. Let's move the exposure down. And now I'm just going to pull down the bottom a little bit. I don't want the bottom to be so bright. So we're just going to bring it down. That looks good right about there. Let's do the same thing with the top. We can actually adjust that if we want to. It looks fine at like 0.78, but if you go down too far, you can adjust it back. I'm actually going to leave it maybe a -1. I think -1 looks a little bit better. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the sky, just to pull it down a tiny bit, just to give it a little more color. Not a lot, just a little. We want it to be very subtle so it's not too noticeable. All right, that looks great. We're going to click on our graduate filter just to remove them. You can also hit M. Okay, now we're going to revisit our saturation and vibrance now that we've got kind of everything set up. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of pump up the vibrance a little bit. I want to get that background just to really pop. And it just kind of pulls out the just kind of the difference between these two sides of the super warm sunlight and the really kind of nice cold shacks over on the right side. All right, that looks great. I might touch a little bit more in the contrast area. All right, guys, so that looks great. Last thing I'm going to do is let's visit our lens correction just a bit. This might be one of those images that works really well with a super subtle vignette. So let's pull in a tiny vignette and just drag it in all the way. So I want to bring in that midpoint so it doesn't look like it's, it doesn't look like we have a vignette. It just looks like the edges are getting darker. And it looks really, really nice. So let's leave it right about there, -24 or -20, kind of in that area, and 0 for the midpoint, so it goes all the way to the center of the image. Now let's check out our before and after. So here's our before, and here is our after. So you can see how all we've done is we've just kind of played around with the colors. We've done all this in Lightroom and added a lot of punch and drama to this image. All right, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you with the next episode.